Commander Zexai's 6 eyes dilated in perfect unison as the scanning beam illuminated something that shouldn't exist. The Vorthak exploration vessel, Silent Wind, had been drifting through this dead solar system for 3 cycles, cataloging the remnants of yet another extinct civilization. But this was different. "Commander," whispered Navigator Kelara, her voice trembling through the ship's neural link. "The 3rd planet. There's something in its orbit." Zexai floated closer to the holographic display, his crystalline exoskeleton clicking against the command chamber's walls. What he saw defied everything the Galactic Confederation knew about primitive species. Surrounding the small blue-green world was a sphere of metal, not scattered debris or natural formations, but a perfectly constructed shell of interconnected structures that completely encased the planet. Ships, millions upon millions of ships locked together in an impenetrable barrier. "How many?" Zexai asked, though his mathematical implants were already calculating the impossible number. "Preliminary scans indicate 12 billion individual vessels, Commander. Each one appears to be a fully armed warship." The bridge fell, silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. In the Confederation's 10,000-year history of exploring the galaxy, they had never encountered anything like this. Even the mighty hegemony at its peak had fielded perhaps 10,000 ships. But 12 billion? Science Officer Nimtha's tentacles writhed with excitement as she interfaced with the ship's sensors. "Commander, the energy signatures are completely dormant. These ships, and they've been dead for millennia, but the construction materials..." She paused, her bioluminescent patches flickering rapidly. "They're composed of elements that shouldn't exist. The atomic structure is stable, but it's like nothing in our periodic classification." Zexai made the decision that would change everything. "Take us closer. I want full spectrum analysis of one of those vessels." As the Silent Wind approached the mysterious shell, details became clearer. Each ship was roughly the same size, about 500 meters in length, but their designs varied wildly. Some were sleek and angular, others bulky and utilitarian. All bore the same strange symbols along their hulls, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow when observed directly. "Commander," Kelara called out, her voice tight with confusion, "I'm detecting something else. There are gaps in the shell, organized passages that lead to the planet's surface." "Show me." The display zoomed in on what appeared to be a massive spiral tunnel boring through the ship formation, creating a clear path to the world below. But as they watched, automated systems began to activate. Ancient mechanisms stirred to life, and the tunnel began to close. "It's reacting to our presence," Nimtha exclaimed. "The shell it's defensive. But against what?" Before Zexai could respond, proximity alarms screamed throughout the ship. Something massive was moving within the shell structure. One of the dormant vessels, a particularly large one with weapon arrays that bristled like metallic thorns, was powering up. "Evasive maneuvers," Zexai commanded, but it was too late. A beam of pure energy, unlike anything in Confederation databases, lanced out from the ancient ship. It didn't strike the Silent Wind. Instead, it passed harmlessly through their shields and hull, scanning them with impossible precision. Then, impossibly, a voice filled their command chamber. It spoke in perfect Vorthak, though the accent was strange. Ancient. "Identify yourselves, travelers. State your species of origin and your intentions regarding the protected world." Zexai's hearts hammered in his chest cavity. "Protected world? I am Commander Zexai of the Vorthak Confederation vessel, Silent Wind. We are explorers cataloging star systems. We mean no harm. Vorthak..." The voice seemed to taste the word. "Unknown species. Scanning genetic markers. Confirmed. You are not of the Devourers. You are not of the Shadow Fleet. You are new." "Who are you?" Zexai asked. "What is this place?" A pause that stretched for an eternity. Then, "We are the Eternal Guard. We are the last gift of humanity to the galaxy. And you, Zexai of the Vorthak, have arrived 500,000 years too late to meet our creators." The implications hit like a meteor strike. Humanity, a species none of them had ever heard of, had built this impossible fortress. But where were they now? Too late for what? Zexai whispered. Too late to fight beside us in the war that consumed the galaxy. Too late to witness the species that turned dying suns into weapons and forged matter from pure thought. Too late to know the humans who chose extinction over surrender and left us here to guard their final secret. The ancient ship's weapons powered down, but somehow that felt more ominous than comforting. However, the voice continued, perhaps it is not too late for you to understand why they made the choice they did. Would you like to see what lies beneath the shell, Commander? Would you like to learn what the humans were protecting? Zexai looked at his crew. Every one of them was staring at him with a mixture of terror and burning curiosity. This was the discovery of the millennium, no, of all time. Whatever lay on that planet below could reshape everything they knew about life in the galaxy. But something in the voice's tone suggested that knowledge came with a price they might not be prepared to pay. Chapter 2. The Guardian's Tale. The ancient ship that had spoken to them detached itself from the vast shell with surprising grace. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, all flowing curves and aggressive angles like a predator designed by artists. As it approached, Zexai could see inscription along its hull, symbols that his translation matrix couldn't decode. Follow, the voice instructed, but know this, once you see what lies below, you become part of the guard. There are some secrets too dangerous to let loose in the galaxy. The silent wind fell in behind the ancient vessel as it approached one of the spiral passages. As they descended through the shell of ships, Zexai counted layer upon layer of defensive positions. These weren't just ships, they were fortifications, weapons platforms, factories, living spaces. An entire civilization could exist within this structure. Commander, Nympha whispered, I'm reading life signs throughout the shell. Millions of them. But they're strange. Like they're not quite alive, but not quite artificial either. The voice seemed to hear her. We are the preserved. When humanity faced extinction, they chose volunteers to become something new, something eternal. We gave up our mortality to guard their greatest work. What kind of work requires 500,000 years of protection? Kalara asked. The kind that could either save the galaxy or destroy it completely. They emerged from the tunnel into the planet's atmosphere, and Zexai gasped. The world below wasn't a planet anymore. It was a machine. Vast continents had been reshaped into geometric patterns with cities that stretched from horizon to horizon. But everything was dark, powered down, waiting. This is Earth, the voice said, with something that might have been nostalgia. Humanity's birth world, and their final laboratory. The ancient ship led them to a landing platform that materialized out of the ground as they approached. As the silent wind touched down, Zexai could see figures emerging from structures around the platform. They walked upright on two legs like many species, but something about them was wrong. They moved too smoothly, too precisely, and their eyes. Don't be afraid, the voice said, and now Zexai could see its source. A tall figure approaching their ship. It had once been human, clearly, but now its skin had a metallic sheen, and circuits glowed softly beneath the surface. We are still human in all the ways that matter. We remember love, loss, hope, and sacrifice. We remember why we chose this fate. Zexai made the decision to open the airlock. The being that entered was unsettling but not threatening. It moved, with impossible grace, and when it spoke, its lips moved just slightly out of sync with the words. I am Captain Sarah Chen, formerly of the United Earth Navy, now Guardian Prime of the Eternal Fleet. I have been waiting 5 centuries of millennia to tell someone this story. She gestured for them to follow her, and they walked through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as they moved. The walls displayed images, star maps, battle formations, species they didn't recognize. The galaxy was very different when humanity first reached the stars, Chen began. We were not the first to develop faster-than-light travel, but we were perhaps the most ambitious. While other species expanded slowly, carefully, we spread like wildfire across the galactic arm. The images shifted to show human ships, sleek vessels that bore no resemblance to the fortress ships in orbit. These were explorers, traders, colonists. We made contact with hundreds of species. The Kethmori philosophers who taught us to think in 11 dimensions. The Veltar engineers who showed us how to manipulate matter at the quantum level. The Sci-Fi musicians who could compose symphonies that affected the flow of time itself. Sci-Fi felt a chill. None of these species existed in current galactic databases. "You're going to tell me they're all dead, aren't you?" he said quietly. Chen's expression remained neutral, but her glowing circuits dimmed slightly. "Not just dead, Commander. Consumed, absorbed, made into components of something vast and hungry that swept across the galaxy like a plague. They entered a vast chamber with a holographic display that filled the entire space. It showed the galaxy as it was 500,000 years ago, thousands of different colored regions representing different species and civilizations. We called them the Devourers, though they had no name for themselves. They were not a species in any sense we understood. They were a process, a way of converting matter, energy, and consciousness into more of themselves. The display began to animate, showing wave after wave of darkness spreading across the galactic map. Every star system it touched went dark. At first, we thought it was a conventional invasion. The combined fleet, an alliance of over 300 species, assembled the largest armada in galactic history. 2 trillion ships carrying the best weapons and shields our combined technology could produce. The display showed the massive fleet moving to intercept the approaching darkness. The battle lasted 18 minutes. The Devourers didn't just destroy our ships. They converted them. Our own weapons were turned against us. Our own crews became extensions of their collective consciousness. Every ship we lost made them stronger. Nimtha's tentacles had gone completely still, a sign of extreme distress in her species. How did humanity survive when so many others didn't? Chen's smile was sad and proud at the same time. "We didn't survive, Science Officer. That's the point. Humanity chose extinction on our own terms rather than absorption into something alien and hostile." She led them to another section of the chamber, where the hologram showed Earth surrounded by construction scaffolds and massive industrial complexes. When it became clear that conventional warfare was impossible, humanity made a choice that no other species had been willing to make. We decided that if we were going to die anyway, we would make our death meaningful. "The shell," Sci-Fi breathed. "You built it as a trap." "Not a trap, Commander, a lock. You see, in our desperate research to find a weapon against the Devourers, we discovered something terrible. Something that could destroy them completely, but only at the cost of sterilizing the entire galaxy." The hologram shifted to show complex equations and energy readings that made no sense to Sci-Fi's enhanced intellect. We called it the reality engine, a device that could rewrite the fundamental constants of physics within a sphere of influence roughly 50,000 light-years across. It would make faster-than-light travel impossible, render most forms of energy generation unstable, and essentially reset the galaxy to a pre-technological state. Kalara whispered something in her native language that roughly translated to "universe killers." "Exactly," Chen said, apparently understanding the term. The Devourers would be destroyed. Their collective consciousness depended on quantum entanglement across vast distances, but every other spacefaring civilization would be trapped on their homeworlds, cut off from each other, essentially bombed back to the Stone Age. "So you built this fortress to guard it," Sci-Fi said, "to make sure it would never be used." Chen shook her head. "No, Commander. We built this fortress to decide whether it should be used. The reality engine lies at the core of this planet, fully constructed and operational. For 500,000 years we have been waiting for the galaxy to prove it deserves to continue existing." The full horror of the situation finally hit Sci-Fi. Humanity had built a doomsday weapon, surrounded it with an impregnable fortress, and appointed themselves judges of all future galactic civilization. "But the Devourers," he said weakly. Surely they were destroyed eventually. Chen's expression grew darker. Oh yes, Commander, they were destroyed, but not by us and not by any weapon you would recognize. Would you like to know what finally stopped the plague that consumed 300 species? Before Zexhai could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Chen's head snapped up, her enhanced senses accessing data streams invisible. To the visitors, impossible, she whispered. After all this time, what is it? Zexhai demanded. Chen turned to face them, and for the first time since they'd met her, she looked genuinely afraid. The Devourers, she said quietly. They're back. Chapter 3. The ancient enemy returns. The chamber erupted into activity as holographic displays materialized throughout the space. Guardian Prime Chen moved with inhuman speed, her consciousness interfacing directly with the fortress's sensors. What Zexhai saw on the displays made his blood freeze. Ships were emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. But these weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were organic nightmares, writhing masses of dark matter that seemed to absorb light itself. And they were moving in perfect synchronization, like fingers of a vast hand reaching across space. How many? Chen asked the air, communicating with other guardians throughout the shell. The initial count suggests 47,000 vessels, came the reply in a voice that seemed to speak from everywhere at once. Configuration matches archived patterns from the last war. They are definitely Devourer constructs. Zexhai grabbed Chen's arm, surprised to find it felt like warm metal. I thought you said they were destroyed. We thought they were, Chen replied, her expression grim. The historical records show their advance stopped abruptly about 400,000 years ago. Their ships went dark, their occupied systems fell silent. We assumed they had finally consumed everything they could reach and burned out. But they didn't, Nympha said, her scientific mind grasping the implications. They evolved, adapted, went dormant until they could find new prey. Exactly, and now they've found us. The holographic display zoomed in on the approaching fleet. The ships weren't just organic. They were growing, adding mass and complexity as they moved. Tendrils of dark energy reached out between them, connecting the entire formation into a single vast organism. Guardian Prime, another voice called from the communication system. Long-range scans indicate the lead vessels are launching scout probes. Estimated time to contact with our outer perimeter, 6 hours. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, and Zexhai could see data streams flowing beneath her enhanced skin. When she opened them again, her expression had hardened into something that might have once been called resolve. 6 hours, she repeated. After 500,000 years of waiting, we have 6 hours to decide the fate of the galaxy. What do you mean? Kellara asked, though Zexhai suspected he already knew. The reality engine, navigator. We always knew this moment might come, when we would have to choose between triggering the device and letting the Devourers consume what's left of galactic civilization. Chen led them quickly through corridors that were transforming around them. Walls slid aside to reveal weapon systems awakening, manufacturing bays where ships were being assembled at impossible speed, and command centers where thousands of Guardians were taking their positions after millennia of waiting. But surely you can fight them, Zexhai said desperately. You have 12 billion ships. And they have something we've never faced before, Chen replied. Time. 400,000 years to study our tactics, to understand our technology, to evolve countermeasures. The Devourers that attack us today are not the same ones humanity fought in the last war. They entered a vast elevator that began descending at tremendous speed. Through transparent walls, Zexhai could see they were passing through layers of the planet's machinery, vast computational cores, energy generation systems, and finally, at the very bottom, something that hurt to look at directly. The reality engine, Chen said quietly, the most powerful weapon ever constructed, and the most terrible choice ever given to a species. The device was both massive and impossible to define. It seemed to exist in more dimensions than Zexhai's eyes could process, a constantly shifting, geometric form that occasionally resembled familiar shapes before flowing into something else entirely. Energy patterns danced around it in colors that didn't exist in normal space. "How does it work?" Nympha whispered, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "By convincing the universe that the fundamental constants of physics are different from what they actually are," Chen explained. "Within its field of effect, faster-than-light travel becomes impossible because space-time itself is restructured. Most forms of advanced technology cease to function because the quantum relationships they depend on are altered. And this would destroy the Devourers? Completely. Their collective consciousness exists as quantum entanglement across galactic distances. Break that connection, and they become nothing more than scattered organic matter. But every other civilization in the galaxy would be trapped, on their homeworlds, unable to travel between stars, unable to communicate across interstellar distances." Sci-Fi stared at the device, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the choice humanity had created. How do you decide something like that?" Chen smiled sadly. "That's exactly the question we've been asking ourselves for 500,000 years, Commander. And now, with the Devourers returning, we finally have to answer it." Alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The voice of another Guardian filled the chamber. "Guardian Prime, enemy scouts have breached the outer system. They're probing our defenses and they're sending a communication." "Put it through," Chen ordered. The voice that filled the chamber was like the sound of stars dying, vast, cold, and utterly alien. "Guardians of the dead world, we have returned to complete the harvest that was interrupted so long ago. You cannot stop us with the crude weapons that failed your predecessors. Surrender the reality engine, and we will grant you the honor of joining our collective consciousness. Refuse, and we will take it from your lifeless forms." The communication ended, leaving them in silence. "They know about the engine," Sci-Fi said. "Of course they do," Chen replied. "They've had 400,000 years to study the energy signatures to understand what we built here. They want to ensure it can never be used against them." "So what do we do?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring at the reality engine. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of eons. "We do what humanity always did when faced with impossible choices, Commander. We find a third option." She turned to face Sci-Fi and his crew, her enhanced eyes glowing with sudden determination. "Tell me about your ship, Commander. Tell me about your technology, your weapons, your capabilities. Because I think the galaxy's newest spacefaring species might just hold the key to winning a war that's been waiting 500,000 years to be fought." "Our ship?" Sci-Fi said, confused. "It's just an exploration vessel. We have basic defensive systems, scientific sensors, nothing that could stand against something like those Devourer ships." "Perhaps not," Chen said with a growing smile. "But you have something the Devourers have never encountered before. Something they've never had time to study or adapt to." "What's that?" "You're completely unknown to them. Your technology, your tactics, your very existence, it's all outside their calculations. And sometimes, Commander, the most powerful weapon in the universe is the element of surprise." As if summoned by her words, more alarms began sounding. The Devourer fleet had reached the outer edge of the solar system, and they were preparing to attack. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Last War's End. Guardian Command Center was a symphony of controlled chaos. Thousands of enhanced humans moved with perfect coordination, their consciousness linked through quantum networks that had operated for 500,000 years. Holographic displays showed the approaching Devourer fleet in terrifying detail. 47,000 ships that pulsed with dark energy and grew larger with each passing moment. "Fleet status report," Chen commanded as she took her position at the central command console. "All 12 billion vessels are powered and ready. Guardian Prime," came the immediate response. "Weapon systems charged, defensive matrices active. The outer shell formation is maintaining position." Sci-Fi watched in amazement as the fortress around Earth transformed. What had appeared to be a static shell of ships was actually a dynamic defense system. Vessels moved into new positions, creating interlocking fields of fire and overlapping shield networks. It was like watching a giant organism prepare for battle. "Commander," Chen said, turning to Zexai, "I need to know everything about your ship's capabilities. Every weapon, every defensive system, every piece of technology that might be unfamiliar to galactic standard. I don't understand how our small ship could possibly matter in a battle of this scale," Zexai replied. But he began accessing his vessel's technical specifications anyway. "The Devourers learn," Chen explained as data flowed across her enhanced vision. "Every weapon they encounter, every tactic used against them, becomes part of their collective knowledge. They adapt, evolve, overcome. But your technology is completely new to them." Nympha suddenly perked up, her bioluminescent patches flashing rapidly. "Commander, what about our quantum resonance sensors? They're a new Vorthak development. We're the only species that uses them." Chen's eyes widened as she processed the technical data. "Quantum resonance. Yes, this could work. The Devourers' collective consciousness relies on quantum entanglement. If we could disrupt those connections locally..." "It wouldn't destroy them," Zexai said, beginning to understand. "But it might confuse them, make them vulnerable." "Exactly. And while they're confused, we hit them with everything we have." The first wave of Devourer scouts had reached the outer edge of the ship shell. The ancient human weapons opened fire, and space lit up with energy, beams that could vaporize asteroids. But the Devourer ships simply absorbed the energy, growing larger and more complex as they fed on the attacks. "They're adapting to our weapons even faster than before," reported one of the Guardian commanders. "Energy absorption efficiency has increased by 300% since the initial contact." Chen cursed in a language that predated most galactic civilizations. 400,000 years of evolution. They're not just immune to our weapons now, they're feeding on them. On the holographic display, Zexai could see the Devourer ships changing. Their dark hulls rippled and flowed, extruding new weapon systems and defensive structures. They were becoming more dangerous with every shot fired at them. "Guardian Prime," came another report. "The main fleet has begun to advance. Estimated time to engagement 2 hours." Chen made a decision that would have seemed insane to any conventional military commander. "Stand down all weapons, full retreat to inner defensive positions." "Guardian Prime?" The confusion in the subordinate's voice was evident even through the neural link. "You heard me. We're not going to feed them anymore. Let them come to us." She turned to Zexai. "Commander, I need you to take your ship and get as close to the lead Devourer vessel as possible. Your quantum resonance sensors might be our only hope of disrupting their coordination." "That's suicide," Kilara protested. "Our ship isn't built for combat." "No," Chen agreed. "But it's built for something more important. It's built for exploration, for discovery, for pushing into the unknown. And right now, the unknown is our greatest weapon." As the Silent Wind prepared to launch, Chen provided them with something that made Zexai's tactical mind real. Complete technical specifications for Guardian weapon systems. If you can disrupt their coordination, even for a few moments, Chen explained, every Guardian ship will target the lead vessel simultaneously. 12 billion weapons firing in perfect coordination. Even the Devourers can't absorb that much energy at once. "And if we can't disrupt them?" Chen's expression was grim. "Then I activate the reality engine, and we reset the galaxy to the Stone Age. Either way, the Devourer's advance ends here." The Silent Wind launched from the planet's surface, ascending through the shell of Guardian ships. As they passed each layer, Zexai could see the ancient weapons tracking their movement, ready to provide covering fire. But he also saw something else, other small ships launching from various points in the shell. "Guardian vessels," Chen's voice came through their communications. "Volunteers who've chosen to join the final mission. You're not going alone, Commander." There were perhaps 100 of them, sleek ships that bore no resemblance to the massive fortress vessels. These were built for speed, stealth, and precision strikes. As the Silent Wind joined the formation, Zexai felt a surge of something he hadn't expected. Hope. "Formation leader to all vessels," Chen's voice reached them from the lead Guardian ship. Target the primary Devourer vessel. Stay close to the Silent Wind. Their sensor disruption is our only advantage. The Devourer fleet had spread into a massive sphere with the largest vessel at its center. This ship was truly monstrous. Easily 50 kilometers long and growing larger as they watched. Tendrils of dark energy connected it to every other ship in the fleet, creating a web of shared consciousness that spanned thousands of kilometers. Beginning quantum resonance scan, Nympha reported, her tentacles dancing over her console. I'm detecting something strange. The quantum entanglement patterns aren't random. They're following mathematical sequences. What kind of sequences? Chen asked over the communication link. They're beautiful, Nympha whispered. Like music, but in 11 dimensions. The Devourers aren't just a collective consciousness. They're a living symphony of quantum harmonics. Sci-Fi felt a chill of understanding. And if we disrupt the music, the symphony falls apart, Chen finished. Can you do it? I think so, but I need to get much closer. Close enough to map the exact harmonic frequencies. The small fleet dove toward the Devourer formation, weaving between energy beams that could have vaporized planets. The enemy ships began to converge on them, but something was wrong with their coordination. Individual vessels were moving slightly out of sync, as if the quantum resonance scanning was already having an effect. It's working, Nympha exclaimed. The resonance field is interfering with their quantum entanglement, but the effect is localized. I need to get right into the center of their formation. That's a one-way trip, Kelara said quietly. Sci-Fi looked at his crew, the navigator who had served with him for 20 years, the science officer whose curiosity had brought them to this moment, the dozen other beings who had chosen to explore the unknown with him. They all looked back at him with the same expression, determination. Do it, he said simply. The Silent Wind broke away from the Guardian formation and dove straight toward the massive central Devourer vessel. Energy beams converged on them from all directions, but somehow they slipped through gaps in the enemy. Fire. Gaps that existed because the Devourer's coordination was breaking down. Initiating full resonance disruption, Nympha announced. All quantum harmonics destabilizing across the fleet. On their screens they could see the effect rippling, outward like waves in a pond. Devourer ships began to separate from each other, the dark energy tendrils snapping one by one. The perfect coordination that had made them invincible was dissolving into chaos. Now, Chen's voice roared across all frequencies. All ships, all weapons, fire everything. The space around them became a storm of energy as 12 billion Guardian weapons fired simultaneously. The concentrated firepower of humanity's final gift to the galaxy struck the Devourer fleet like the wrath of dying gods. The lead vessel, deprived of its connection to the collective consciousness, could not adapt fast enough. It began to come, apart under the assault, its organic hull peeling away in layers. But as it died, it sent out one final pulse of energy, straight toward the Silent Wind. Brace for impact, Sci-Fi shouted. But he knew there was no surviving what was coming. The energy beam struck their ship, and passed right through it without causing any damage. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Nympha began to laugh, a sound like wind chimes, in a gentle breeze. The quantum resonance field, she exclaimed, it's protecting us. The energy beam can't maintain coherence in the disrupted quantum environment. Across the battlefield, the same phenomenon was occurring. Devourer weapons were losing coherence, their ships were breaking apart, and their collective consciousness was fragmenting into billions of individual minds that no longer knew how to work together. The war that had consumed the galaxy 500,000 years ago was finally ending. But as the Devourer fleet collapsed, something unexpected happened. The individual ships didn't self-destruct or flee. They began to change. The organic hulls started to shift and reshape, and when the transformation was complete, they no longer looked like weapons of war. They looked like exploration vessels. Chen, Sci-Fi called over the communication link. Are you seeing this? Yes, came the reply, filled with wonder. They're reverting. Without the collective consciousness driving them to consume and destroy, they're becoming what they originally were. Which was explorers, Commander. Just like you. The Devourers weren't a separate species. They were the end result of what happens when exploration becomes conquest, when curiosity becomes hunger, when the desire to understand the universe becomes the need to consume it. As the last of the collective consciousness dissolved, thousands of individual ships began broadcasting on standard communication frequencies. The voices that came through were confused, disoriented, but recognizably alive in ways the collective had never been. Where are we? How long have we been? What have we become? Chen's voice carried a warmth that Sci-Fi hadn't heard before. You're free, she broadcast to the former Devourers. For the first time in 500,000 years, you're free to choose your own path. The reality engine would not be activated. The galaxy would not be reset to the Stone Age. Instead, it would have a chance to rebuild, to learn from the mistakes of the past and to explore the stars with wisdom rather than hunger. But as Sci-Fi watched the former Devourer ships beginning to scatter across the galaxy, he realized that humanity's greatest gift wasn't the reality engine or the Guardian fleet. It was the choice to trust the future to species they would never meet, in the hope that they would choose exploration over conquest, understanding over consumption, and wisdom over power. Epilogue: The New Galaxy. 1 year later, Commander Sci-Fi stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Galactic Cooperation Station, watching ships from dozens of species arrive and depart in peaceful coordination. The station orbited Earth, no longer a fortress world but a symbol of what could be accomplished when civilizations chose cooperation over conquest. The former Devourers, now calling themselves the Returned, had integrated remarkably well into galactic society. Their unique perspective, having experienced both the ultimate collective consciousness and individual freedom, made them valuable mediators and counselors. Many had chosen to become explorers again, pushing into regions of space that had been abandoned for millennia. Commander, Navigator Kel-Ara approached with a data pad. We've received authorization for the deep space mission. The Andromeda Gateway project has been approved by the Cooperation Council. Sci-Fi smiled. Humanity's archives had contained references to other galaxies, other realms of space where entirely different forms of life might exist. The new galactic civilization was ready to take its first tentative steps beyond the Milky Way. Any word from Guardian Prime Chen? She's chosen to remain on Earth with most of the other Guardians. They're working on something they call the Memory Project, preserving the experiences of every species that was lost to the Devourers. Through the observation deck's transparent walls, Sci-Fi could see Earth in the distance. The planet's surface was still covered with the vast machinery humanity had built, but now it hummed with new purpose. Instead of housing a doomsday weapon, it had become the galaxy's greatest library and research center. Science Officer Nimtha floated over to join them, her bioluminescent patches glowing with contentment. The quantum resonance network is fully operational, she reported. Real-time communication across the entire galaxy, with built-in safeguards to prevent any species from using it to create another collective consciousness. And the reality engine? Permanently deactivated but not destroyed. Guardian Prime Chen insisted it be preserved as a reminder of what happens when exploration becomes exploitation. Sci-Fi nodded. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the price of unchecked expansion and the danger of losing sight of why they explored the stars in the first place. Sir? Kel-Ara said quietly. There's something else. Long-range sensors have detected artificial structures in the void between galaxies. They're massive, and they're moving toward us. Sci-Fi felt a familiar chill run down his spine. How massive? Each structure is roughly the size of a solar system, Commander, and there are hundreds of them. Nimtha's patches flickered with concern. Could they be more Devourers? Some kind of backup collective that was hidden in intergalactic space? Unknown, Kel-Ara replied. But their energy signatures are completely different from anything we've encountered. They're not organic like the Devourers were, and they're not technological, Like our ships, they're something else entirely. Sci-Fi was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the peaceful traffic around the cooperation station. Ships from the Vorthak Confederation worked alongside vessels from the Returned, while Guardian craft shared docking facilities with explorers from dozens of newly contacted species. It had taken a year to build this fragile peace, and now something new was approaching from the darkness between stars. Time to intercept? He asked. At their current speed, approximately 50 years, Kalara said. But Commander, and they're accelerating. And some of our deep space monitoring stations have reported that they're sending out scout probes. Small things, barely detectable, but they're mapping every inhabited system in the galaxy. Have you informed Guardian Prime Chen? She's already aware. She's requested an immediate conference with all species representatives. And, sir, she specifically asked for you to attend. Sci-Fi sighed. Just when they thought they had found peace, the universe had decided to present them with another mystery. But perhaps that was the nature of existence. There would always be something new beyond the horizon. Always another question to answer. Always another challenge to face. Prep the silent wind, he ordered. It looks like our exploration days are far from over. As they prepared to depart for Earth, Sci-Fi reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. A routine cataloging mission had led to the discovery of humanity's greatest secret, a battle that decided the fate of galactic civilization, and now the approach of something entirely unknown. But he realized that this was exactly what humanity had hoped for when they chose to preserve the galaxy rather than destroy it. They had trusted that future species would face whatever came next with wisdom, courage, and most importantly, together. The structures from beyond the galaxy were still decades away, but already the species of the Milky Way were beginning to work together to understand what they might represent. Perhaps they were threats to be defended against. Perhaps they were fellow explorers from distant realms. Perhaps they were something entirely beyond current understanding. But whatever they were, the galaxy would face them not as competing species driven by fear and hunger, but as a united civilization driven by curiosity and hope. As the silent wind departed for Earth, Sci-Fi smiled. Humanity had given the galaxy many gifts: advanced technology, the Guardian fleet, the reality engine, and the preserved knowledge of countless lost civilizations. But their greatest gift had been a simple one: the example of choosing to trust the future. Now it was time for that future to prove worthy of their trust. The stars beckoned, vast and full of mysteries yet to be discovered. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, ancient structures moved through the darkness, carrying secrets that would soon transform everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. The age of exploration was just beginning. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon was not the reality engine that could reset the galaxy, nor the Guardian fleet that could defend it. It was the simple faith that somewhere among the stars, other species would choose wisdom over power, cooperation over conquest, and hope over fear. They were right to have that faith. The galaxy they saved would go on to achieve wonders they could never have imagined. From The Guardian's Legacy, A History of the Second Galactic Age, by historian Veltara of the Cooperation Council. The end.